Thank you, Eric. So I'm going to talk a little bit about formulation, the co-creation part that takes place primarily in the lab, or at least that's what is the perception of. And so I'm going to first talk about some misconceptions, then we'll go through some top level, what goes into the formulation, and some key characteristics there. But look, a lot of times you have people think, oh, well, it's easy enough to do a beverage. We come up with a concept. Let's make a lemonade. So what do? We take lemons, we take sugar, we take water, and boom, we have lemonade. Easy enough, right? Well, I think probably everyone in this room knows it's not quite that simple. These are all just a few examples of products that would match that concept. And one of these lemonades is one of the products that we work with. And their idea is an organic, and they're actually looking at a kosher for Passover product. So there's a lot of different aspects that go into defining what your product is beyond the simple, let's put lemon, sugar, and water together in a bottle. So there are four key concepts I see that you need to set up for developing your product. This has already been mentioned, and hound this in as many times as we can, is who's your target market? What are some considerations of who's going to be consuming this product? Distribution and retail. Where are you going to be selling this? Is this going to be shelf stable, sitting on the shelves? Is this refrigerated? Will this be going into restaurants? Are you going into food service? Those are critical to determine up front before you start formulating. Functional ingredients and ingredient claims. You want to know up front, are you going to make a claim about, is this going to be organic? Is this going to have certain vitamins in it? Are there various sorts of claims? And there's a huge gamut of options out there. You want to know that up front before you start formulating. And I put last organoleptic targets, that being your sensory targets. I put that last because that's what most people put first. And just want to emphasize that while it is very important, it shouldn't be done in the absence of the others. So I'm mostly talking about formulation, but I like to think of formulation as more than just taking a bunch of ingredients and throwing them in a bottle, and you have this liquid concoction or a powder concoction, and this is your formulation. But instead, I like to think of developing an experience. You're not drinking a beverage in a vacuum. You're not taking a little plastic cup and tasting little sips of it. You drink the bottle in context with so many considerations going on to what you consume. And so when you're developing the beverage, you've got to think about the five senses. They all interact and affect this experience that you're going to have. Now, often we just think about taste, the sweet, sour, salty, bitter, savory aspects, and that is very important, and you will be balancing, the sweetness and the sourness and the acids, etc. But all of the senses have, in my opinion, equal importance to the experience with the beverage. So the character that you get from a strawberry or from a chocolate, that's actually olfactory. You have the touch, so you have like the how thick is your smoothie or bubbles. That tactile can be very important. The can opening, the pop in the bottle, that sets up your experience. And then the color is so critical. There's been some really neat studies showing where people make mistakes about what they think the flavor is or the sweetness based purely on the color. So you can use these senses to manipulate the experience that you want to have. Here, I just want to show, you're making products for a diverse group of people, and everybody has a different set of sensory tools that they have. So each person, not everyone's going to like your product. Another thing is the context, as I mentioned, is important. And so we look at this, the dots here, and it appears as though the dots on the left, or your right, are darker than the ones on the left. But when you put it into context, you see that they're actually the same. So this is a concept that is important to keep in mind. Also, we keep talking about it being an emotional experience, and just our biology is set up so that this is indeed a very emotional, connected experience. So just very quickly, I want to talk about, just summarize what those key points that need to be done before getting into formulation. The impact of all the senses, the diversity between the consumers, context is important, and you have a strong link to emotions. And now we get into the lab, and if you take nothing else away from what I say, is realize that the time in the lab is only a small portion of what goes into formulation. There's a lot of upfront work that really needs to be done working with the rest of your team. And so these are just some of the considerations that then your expert in formulation needs to take into consideration. And with that, I'm going to, one of the key things is always thinking about what's going to happen next, and that's the operations and production of your product. So you want to be thinking about that from day one. And so now we're going to have Michael Fougere is going to talk about that aspect of the business.
So this is a prime example of what happens in the beverage business. The project gets behind, operations come in to take heroic action to keep the project on time. So thank you, it's good to be here. So outsourced operations, just want to talk a little bit. Some of these points Eric made earlier, just to reiterate them, because they are critical to the success of the project. So we love working with entrepreneurs, great vision. So entrepreneurs go out and they bring the vision to life. They get samples created, they go out and hire people to sell the product, and they go out and hire people to market the product. But the pool of capital may be small, so at the end of the day, operations usually gets turned over to, as Eric had mentioned before, it's pretty typical, let's bring in an intern to help us out, let's bring in a family member. If that family member has an operations background, good for you, good to have somebody like that in the family, but it's a pretty important point just to keep in mind as you're putting together your projects and your brands. So we get involved once Kathryn's finished with the formula or another formula house develops a product for you. And what we do is we commercialize your formula. So there's several things we do in advance of manufacturing. And this comes from key input from our clients and the entrepreneurs. What's your targeted geographic distribution? If your targeted geographic distribution is the Northeast, you don't want a co-packer in California to make your product for you. So that's a key consideration. The desired primary and secondary packaging. So do you want a glass bottle? Do you want Tetra Pak? Do you want a can? What is it you want to go to market with? And we provide some input relative to the options available. And then based on the formula and what's the required manufacturing process. So you probably already know there's several processes for making a beverage product. And depending, again, on the formulation development and things like pH and other attributes of the product, there's different processes which would lead us to co-packer selection. So all those things get taken into consideration. And then we get involved in sourcing ingredients and packaging. So during the formulation process, we identify the suppliers to work with, and then we go out and we source on a commercial level. So we take our years of experience working with various suppliers in the industry so that we have the key contacts and we can get the entrepreneur the best pricing. We don't pay for the ingredients, we look for you to do that, but we can negotiate on your behalf and make sure that you get the best possible deal to help keep that COGS manageable. So Certifications. Eric mentioned that we work a lot in the natural and organic channels. So if you're going to be an organic certified product, there's certification responsibilities that you have to go through. And we provide a lot of support in those areas as well for entrepreneurs. Developing manufacturing and packaging specs. These are all things, by the way, that when we sit and we speak with entrepreneurs for the first time, it's like an eye-opening experience. It's like, you mean we have to do all these things before we can go to market? And it is. You have to have the manufacturing specifications. You have to negotiate a contract and make sure the materials get there on time, and coordinating the suppliers and manufacturers to make sure that all documentation that is required by the manufacturer and the FDA is on site before you can get your product produced. And those are things that we wouldn't expect everybody to know, but there's certainly things that are very important to get your product to market. After manufacturing, there's arranging for the QA test. You want to make sure your product is safe and to go to the market, so that you get one shot to get out there with the best product, and doing the QA testing, making sure that's part of your plan, not just to produce the product and ship it. A good contract manufacturer wouldn't allow that to happen anyways, but you need to understand that you want the best product to the marketplace, so the QA testing is a very, very key element of that. Inventory management of brand owners' assets. Depending on what type of product and the ingredients you're using, you could have thousands of dollars in raw material and finished goods inventory sitting on the floor at a third-party manufacturer. You want to have somebody available that's managing those assets for you, because it's very time-consuming, and assets can easily be lost if they're not tracked and from an inventory standpoint. Excess yield loss and recovery of the excess yield loss from manufacturers. During the course of manufacturing, there will be product that's lost in a process system. It's just based on the design of the equipment. It doesn't matter what process you have or what type of product you're making. And those are all negotiated in the contract, and then after production, to go back and take a look at what your yield was. If you have 100% going in, your yield should be 97, 98% coming out. Anything greater than that, you need to get that money back from your contract manufacturer. Setting up third-party logistics. So besides the contract manufacturer, again, depending on what your market is and what your geographic target distribution area is, identifying a third-party logistics provider that will provide you distribution and customer order selection processes. And then managing freight is also a key component of making sure that you're getting the best cost of goods to the marketplace. So there's a couple of bonus points up here I want to add, and these are two actually critical things. In my career, I've been involved in over 100 new product commercialization launches, and almost 90% of them, these 2 points are really critical. In consumer packaged goods, the money today is in supply chain. It's in materials and freight. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't know that up front. And 2 or 3 years in, you can't get to the product to the customer on time, and you're not making the margins that you need to make. It's usually because the materials and freight. The project gets behind, you start air freighting raw materials in, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this, and then you get the bill for the FedEx charges, and that really adds up. And then this last point, it's a point I always make when I speak to potential new clients, and Kathryn and Eric get tired of hearing me say it, but 90% of the projects I've been involved in, they get derailed because the artwork is an issue. Because you have to develop the artwork, you have to send it to the printer, there's proofs to be signed off, and that process takes 2 or 3 rounds. Somebody goes to Europe for a couple of weeks on vacation, God love them that they can do that, but that can delay a project. So really pay, as entrepreneurs, as you're developing a project, just keep an eye on this, because I'm telling you, 90% of the projects fall out off the timeline because of the artwork not getting done on time. And I think that's it.